Hello everyone, this is Sam Aunai. My dissertation analysis is titled, Does the Bureaucracy Move the Needle on Trust? This is a dissertation by Louis Jude Fusia, PhD candidate, submitted to the School of Public and Environmental Policy at Indiana University. The background of this dissertation is based on the assumption that attitudes towards government, including perceptions, are shaped and largely based on the experiences with or the attitudes towards those administrative institutions. There's also an assumption that bureaucracy moves the needle on trust. There are often calls to reform the bureaucracy in order to improve trust in government. So the problem statement within this dissertation is looking at it, bureaucratic performances impacting public attitudes and trust in government. The purpose of this research or dissertation was to develop a method to assess the degree by which the bureaucracy moves the needle on trust in government. The importance or the significance of this dissertation is based on the fact that most empirical research and studies in political science attempt to explain trust in government but fail to include considerations of the bureaucracy. This is a quantitative research using a multi-method approach of both a survey experimental design as well as a longitudinal analysis of public opinion data collected over a 40-year period. There are various components within the literature review, but to note some of the key areas is looking at it from an attitude perspective. Since the purpose of this dissertation was looking at the attitudes and how the attitudes of individuals impact the way they perceive or foresee the performances of administrative agencies in performing their functions. And so it was important for this study to define attitude. So looking at it from the cognition perspective, using the thoughts and beliefs of people associated with a particular object, the effect or the feelings or the emotions individuals may associate or attach to an object, and also looking at it from a behavioral intent. These are the reactions or the intentions to act in response to a particular object. Additionally, there was some discussion about the partisan polarization of public opinion, especially in looking at it how this polarization affects the feelings of members towards other individuals in other parties rather than based on ideology itself. Attitudes towards an object are formed on the basis of experiences with that particular object. And it's important to understand these because this helps us to see how attitudes towards government are based on the experiences with government or the perceptions about their performances. And this relates to this dissertation because the direct experiences of institutions of government will affect the attitudes towards trust in those particular institutions. There were several limitations to this dissertation. To note a couple from the survey experimental design, there's a thought and a discussion or suggestion that the replication of the findings of this experiment would provide additional confidence in the findings within the study itself. And then from a longitudinal analysis, the public opinion data that was assessed is basically that's what it is. It's limited by what is available. There's nothing more that you can dig into it. The data is the data based on what was collected over a 40-year span. And then collectively, from a negative performance of bureaucracy affect individual attitudes, but a collective attitudes appear favorable to the bureaucracy. Well, this appears to be inconsistent to results without any clear explanation. I suppose the quickest example would be that we may like our individual member of Congress, but we may not necessarily like Congress as a whole. And so it's the same concept here with the bureaucracy. From the survey experiment design, the primary research question was Q about the performance of one federal agency increases or decreases trust in government. The survey questions were analyzed using the ANOVA and also the regression tables. There were several hypotheses. Just to note a couple, for example, a cue about high performance will increase trust, while a cue about low performance will decrease trust. Hypothesis 2 looks at low performance cue will have a larger effect on trust than a high performance cue. Hypothesis 3 looks at the performance as well as the saliency, and looking at it and if it moves the needle on trust. And then hypothesis 4 looks at the performance and partisan alignment. Within the findings itself, hypothesis 1, yes, it does support the hypothesis that a cue and high performance will increase trust in government. Interestingly enough, this result was largely driven by those who identified themselves as Democrats. Hypothesis 2 looks at the asymmetry effect of performance. Again, this supports the hypothesis and largely supported by those who identify themselves as Republicans. Hypothesis 3 and hypothesis 4, while there was some movement into how it moves the needle on trust in government, the results were not statistically significant within this dissertation. The survey experiment used the Amazon's Mechanical Turk, or the MTurk. In this platform, typically connects the requester of the survey to those who are willing to perform the task for a small fee. In this case, the subjects in this survey experiment were offered $1 to complete the survey, and over 3,000 surveys were collected, and information and questions were asked based on individual experiences that people had with 6 federal agencies as listed: EPA, Social Security, the Consumer Product, as well as Department of Commerce and Transportation, and the FCC. For the longitudinal analysis, the primary research question was, does the bureaucracy approval affect trust in government? This was based on public opinion collected over a 40-year span, and this was the aggregate data. There are several hypotheses. A couple of them include short-term effect of aggregate attitudes towards the bureaucracy on trust in government, the magnitude of the short-term effect on trust to compare to other political actors and institutions. The findings from this from the longitudinal analysis indicates that the bureaucratic approval is positive and statistically significant. The bureaucratic approval does affect trust in government in the short term, and sometimes greater than the president, and comparable to Congress and also to the Supreme Court. Key summary results from this dissertation so far are that negative performance cue decreases trust. Attitudes towards the bureaucracy do affect trust in government in the short term. Key lessons learned: the bureaucracy does move the needle on trust in government. Any reform to improve performance is unlikely to generate trust. However, if reforms fail to increase performance, it is unlikely to decrease trust. These 2 points make it, looking at it from any more reforms to try and improve performance, it's unlikely to increase trust than what it already experiences. And then the other lesson learned here is that bureaucracy is unaccounted for in most empirical analysis and studies. Contribution to the body of language. This dissertation adds to the knowledge that the bureaucracy as a function of understanding trust in government, and that the bureaucracy is largely missing from most empirical studies and analysis, perhaps an underdeveloped view. This is because most political scientists merely look at the bureaucracy as a part of the executive branch, but primarily from the angle of the president, the office of the president, and not necessarily the myriad of agencies that make up the bureaucracy, as well as sometimes public administration scholars fail to appreciate the role politics and political institutions play in shaping managerial and or public administration operations within government. There are ample opportunities for further research and studies, especially looking at whether agency saliency and partisanship do affect performance trust relationship, and whether further examination of both the micro and macro level determinants of attitudes towards government. Connecting this dissertation to our study so far, this quarter, one of our texts notes the following. As we view bureaucratic accountability and performance from all these perspectives, it will become apparent that the executive branch is a dynamic collection of organizations that perform, in some instances better than others, innumerable vital functions in and to the American political system. Therefore, this dissertation affirms this notion by indicating that the bureaucracy does move the needle on trust by the functions that it performs. And this pretty much ends my dissertation analysis. I look forward to your comments, questions, and views. Thank you.